Live. Let's see. Look at that. Boom. All right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the John Lavenia Success Mastermind. Today's general session is, wow, Tuesday, August 2nd. The year is just flying by, isn't it, guys? 2022. How crazy. I am your host. Live. Let's see. Look at that. Boom. All right. Boom. There Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on? To the John. Hold on. I don't know why that's doing its thing. Okay. Welcome, John Lavenia Success Mastermind. I am your host today for general session, Stuart Wilde. I'm really honored, as always, to be with you guys to share some discussions with you about spirit and science and success and philosophy and all kinds of stuff like that. Today has been a topic that I've wanted to cover with you guys for quite some time. John and I have had many discussions on the side about Stoicism and Stoic philosophy and how it pertains to just a worldview and an outlook on life, and how I personally have found a lot of solace in Stoic philosophy throughout not only COVID, times of uncertainty, but also through, let's say, physical health challenges. Some of you guys know I went through a double spinal fusion, things like that, loss of career, change of career. And so Stoicism is really, the concept of Stoicism is really just about, how to live a happy and tranquil life in the face of adversity and weathering storms and things like that. And so I put together, of course, a little presentation for us. Let's see, I just want to check in. All right, we've got Catherine, I see Daisy. Hi, Daisy, and Gail, and Linda, and Lindsay, and Lynn, and Virginia. All right, well, great. So glad to see you guys. And I'm going to share my screen. And we'll go from there. Give me the thumbers so that you guys can see my screen. Perfect. All right, so a lot of this stuff is going to be very familiar to you guys, and some of it's going to be very familiar in terms of some of these concepts and meditations. But today, and of course, when we do these little sessions on Tuesday mornings, these are topics that we could spend hours, if not weeks or months or lifetimes covering. And so, this is just little snippets and tidbits and introductory kinds of things. So today we're going to talk about Stoicism 101, the 4 Stoic virtues for success, and Stoic concepts and meditations. Now, as we're going through some of this, you guys, as always, if you want to jot down some notes and, kind of make note of some things that you want to chat about at the end of the presentation, and then we can have a discussion about some of this stuff. So here we go. Boom. So what is Stoicism? Stoicism is a Hellenistic philosophy, and Hellenistic really just means Greek-like. And so we're talking about essentially turn of the first millennium, let's say, or around just a couple hundred years BCE, so about 300 years BC to the early 1st century AD. And so again, Stoicism, the Hellenistic philosophies, you probably are familiar with some of them. There's cynicism, right? So I'm sure you guys have heard of cynicism, right? It's where we get the word cynic from. And that is really characterized by a rejection of social norms and social values and things like that. And then you've got Epicureanism, which is kind of a precursor to hedonism, which essentially is about happiness comes from seeking a moderate version of pleasure and an avoidance of pain. That's kind of Epicureanism. Then you've got skepticism, which is, doubt everything, right? We all know what a skeptic is, right? So skeptics had, let's say, rules and methods for asking questions, question everything kind of thing. And then you have Stoicism, and Stoicism really has influenced religion, philosophy, all the way up until modern times, let's say. So Stoicism, based on happiness and tranquility, are achieved through self-control, overcoming our negative emotions, and attachment to outcomes. It's about acceptance of the events and circumstances in our lives. The Stoics use three main methods in their approach. One is logic, and that is the way to determine if your perceptions are correct or true. Physics, which again is kind of early science, essentially, a way to understand the natural world. These guys really believed in fate. They believed that that God was fate, and that the things that happened around us were fated. And they had a pretty interesting concept of trying to reconcile free will versus fate, right? And so then they had a code of ethics, rules to live a good life based on moral virtues according to natural law. And some famous Stoics, just to kind of roll through the history part of it. So the first Stoic was a guy named Zeno of Citium, which is essentially Cyprus, where he came from. He was a sea merchant who lost everything, crash landed in Greece, and really essentially came up with a philosophy to assuage the fact that that he lost everything and had to be okay with that. And the word Stoicism or Stoic comes from the fact that he taught his philosophy on the Stoa Poikile, which is what translates to the painted porch of the agora or the marketplace in Athens. And then, we could go through, there's dozens of these Stoic philosophers through the years, but these are just kind of the most famous ones. Then you have Seneca the Younger from 4 BC to AD 65. And all of these people that I'm going to mention to you, and some of them you've probably heard of, very interesting because they're all very different in their background, their history, and yet they all kind of came to the understandings and studies and practices, let's say, of Stoicism as a way to live their lives. So Seneca the Younger was a politician, he was a statesman. He was actually highly criticized because he had a fair amount of wealth and reputation and status, let's say. And so a lot of people would have a hard time seeing him as a Stoic because he was more of a materialist, let's say. He was an advisor to Nero and then got accused of an assassination plot against Nero, and he was forced to take his own life. Then there's Epictetus. Some of you guys may have heard of Epictetus. He's one of the more famous Stoic philosophers, 55 to 135. He was born into slavery, and he gained his freedom as a teenager, but through his understandings of Stoic philosophy, he was able to free his mind as a youth. And he started a school of philosophy that was based on self-knowledge and acceptance of the events in our lives. He came up with a concept called the Dichotomy of Control, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then probably the most famous Stoic philosopher is Marcus Aurelius from 120 to 180. And he's known as the Philosopher King and the last of the five good emperors of Rome. His reign was actually marked by tragedy. Hi, Mandy. And so interesting for him is that he was kind of the reluctant emperor, and his rule was marked by the Antonine Plague. And so, just coming out of a period of COVID and maybe an ongoing period of COVID for us, the Antonine Plague actually wiped out like 25% of the population of Rome. And you can look it up. It's pretty interesting. And they're pretty sure that it was actually a smallpox outbreak, was the Antonine Plague. But millions of people died during that plague. And then also his rule or his reign as emperor was also marked by ongoing wars throughout his whole emperorhood. So interesting stuff. And he really had to come to terms with the fact that he was in charge of the Roman Empire. He didn't really want to be. He wrote a pretty amazing self-reflective book that really was not intended to ever be published, called Meditations. And I recommend you guys check it out. I'll even drop it in the chat later if you remind me towards the end. But Meditations is really just his self-dialogue to himself. And it's really pretty fascinating because he never really thought that it would ever be published. It was just sort of notes to self. And as a king, as an emperor, pretty fascinating. So these four people are kind of the people that really are known as the Stoics. And they all kind of have different stories and different approaches, but are all seen as Stoic philosophers. So here's just kind of a cool rendition of the Stoic Wakile in Athens in the Agora. This is obviously a recreation. This is all in ruins now, but this is where Zeno would teach early Stoic philosophy. So Stoicism is essentially based on virtue, vice, and indifference, right? And their understanding is that everything can be given a value judgment in relation to living a happy and tranquil life. And so they see things as either virtuous or vicious, right? And if it's virtuous, then that means that it is leading towards living a happy and tranquil life. And that is, things that are good and positive and helpful towards that. And then there's vice, which is where, or vicious, where the word vice comes from. And of course, that are things that are seen as negative or detrimental towards your personal development or living a happy and tranquil life. And then there's this concept of indifference. And I think that this is where Stoicism has a tendency to get misunderstood, let's say. Because to me, indifference is a powerful concept and a powerful practice. And I call it the Stoic superpower, because it's really about non-attachment. And it's not about necessarily not caring, but it's about not being attached to the outcome. So you might have a desired outcome about something. And Napoleon Hill talks about this in Think and Grow Rich, and many of the books, personal development books that we've read, talk specifically about not being attached to the outcome, having a burning desire, but not having an attachment to the outcome. Detachment probably is more like you don't really care, whereas non-attachment is you have the ability to have kind of a take it or leave it kind of attitude. And it's not about not caring. It's really about this understanding that whatever will be, and this acceptance and understanding of the way of the world. Because if you get too attached to a particular outcome, then that's where disappointment and suffering tend to come from. So again, these guys were all about kind of early, like pre-Buddhism, in the sense of, or maybe even right around, I guess Buddhism was about 500 BC. So, in a different continent, similar concepts about how to alleviate suffering in our lives and live a good life. So you've probably heard this term, the four cardinal virtues, right? And this is, kind of the one of the main tenets of Stoicism. And so this is, of course, a series of statues that are thousands of years old. On the far left, we have wisdom or prudence, and then we have justice with the scales, right? And then we have fortitude, which is courage. And then we have what's called temperance, right? And these are the four Stoic virtues. And I'll kind of roll through these and we'll chat about them in a little bit. So I put these in order. You'll notice I switched the order up a little bit, right? In some circles, they talk about wisdom being the first of the virtues, and then justice, and then fortitude, and then temperance. I kind of feel like temperance, at least for me, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this, but I feel like temperance is the gateway, because it's really about self-control and moderation, and let's say being careful about and being self-aware about the actions that we take. This is obviously like a picture of Nero with the grapes and the wine, and the big feast and the gluttony and all that kind of stuff. And to me, this is sort of the classic example of intemperance, let's say. So to me, you know, the gateway into the cardinal virtues is understanding that we have control over our actions, what we put in our body, to be, you know, to have moderation, right? And some of us have a harder time with that than others. You know, this is of course where you know, some of us may have relationships with substances, whether it's food or you know, other things that we put into our bodies, right? And to me, this is critical in terms of let's say the gateway into the four virtues. Okay. And then here's a cool quote by Seneca. Hold fast then to this sound and wholesome rule of life, that you indulge the body only so far as needful for good health. The body should be treated more rigorously, that it may not be disobedient to the mind. Eat merely to relieve your hunger, drink merely to quench your thirst, dress merely to keep out the cold, house yourself merely as a protection against personal comfort. So it's really about living a life of moderation and not being in excess, right? And then the next one, I think, at least for me, that resonates with me is courage, right? And courage, as you guys know, is a little different than bravery. Courage is acting in the face of fear, even when you are afraid. It's about taking action, right? So here's a little picture of somebody, you know, taking the leap, right? And of course, these are the things that I want you guys to be making notes of. Like, what do these things mean to you? What does temperance mean to you? And how is that, you know, something that is relevant in your life? And then, of course, courage as well, you know, and whether it's something like we've all done, you know, in entrepreneurship, you know, starting a new business, taking that leap, you know, doing something even though it might be scary, you know, whether it's internal or external, right? A lot of times, and really the Stoics believe that things like fear, the things that hold us back are, you know, 99% mental, right? That most of the things that hold us back are really constructs of our own mind. And here's a famous quote by Marcus Aurelius: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And then the finish to that is, "The obstacle is the way," right? And so this concept of the boulder on the road, or the thing that's in your way, is a gift, right? It's the thing that will enable you to overcome adversity or physical or mental hurdles or challenges in order to accomplish our goals. So courage. And then wisdom. To me, wisdom is a little more evolved, right? And so I get that the Stoics see wisdom as a cornerstone, and might want to put that as the first of the virtues. To me, wisdom comes from taking knowledge and experience and applying that in a practical way in your life, right? And so I think wisdom comes from life lessons, comes from self-reflection and introspection and things like that. And it's about an applied knowledge versus just knowing stuff, right? You can know stuff and read a book about something, but when we think about people that are wise, we think about people that have had some life experience and have some understandings about the way that the world works. And then you put those two things together, and then you get wisdom, right? And again, I'm interested to, because, you know, I could read, you know, Merriam-Webster, whatever, you know, dictionary definitions of these things. But to me, I want to hear what your guys' definitions of these virtues are. And here's another quote from Marcus. "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are." So going back to wisdom, wisdom is interesting because in Stoicism, you know, wisdom is what gives you the ability to determine whether something is virtuous or vicious, right? Whether it's something that's good for you or something that's bad for you. And then also to be able to understand how to be indifferent about something, right? Because there are things that are kind of neutral, right? Whereas, they saw things like wealth and materialism and fame and reputation, whereas the Cynics would very much condemn those things. The Stoics just kind of saw them as neutrals, like, okay, if you had wealth, that's all right, but you shouldn't be too attached to it. If you had good reputation, that's cool, but you shouldn't be too attached to that. You don't base your identity on those things, and they're definitely not the things that make you a good or a bad person, but those are the things to be indifferent about. And then to me, the fourth virtue is justice. And I think that it takes, and again, I want to hear your take on this, but to me, it takes some temperance, some wisdom, and some courage in order to understand how to be a just person, right? We think about King Solomon, as being, a wise, just person, right? And unless you have an understanding of the way that the world works and human nature, then I don't think you can just sort of mete out justice in the sense. And I want to say justice in this sense is not about punishment. It may have something to do with the importance of having laws and rules in a society, but it's really about treating everybody fairly, right? So equal protection under the law, right? We say here in America, and of course, then we get into like social justice and environmental justice and all that kind of stuff. But the reality in terms of the Stoics, and especially for somebody like Marcus Aurelius, who was an emperor, he was really just about treating everybody the same. And as you can see, Lady Justice here has a blindfold, right? And we've all heard the term blind justice, right? And in a perfect world, or in an ideal situation, everybody is treated the same, regardless of what they look like, what they believe, what they think, what sex or what gender or whatever. Justice knows no particulars, right? Everybody should be treated the same under equal justice. Here's a Marcus quote again. Live out your life in truth and justice, tolerant of those who are neither true nor just. There are some passages in Meditations where he talks about the hardest thing. It's easy to be kind and considerate and compassionate and just to people who think the way that you do, right? The real challenge comes when you're giving those same opportunities and you're treating people that are potentially cruel to you, or don't have the same belief systems as you, things like that. And so again, these are thousands of years old contemplations that aren't necessarily religious in nature, right? These are philosophical contemplations about how to live a good life. So again, fascinating stuff to me. I want to hear your take on justice, on courage, on temperance, and on wisdom. And then Epictetus, I mentioned earlier, the dichotomy of control. Okay, so dichotomy, of course, implies two, right? And so the dichotomy of control essentially is that everything in life, and you guys have probably heard me say this over the course of the last couple of years, that everything in life falls within two categories: that which we have control over and that which we don't have any control over. The things that we have control over, which of course we've talked about over and over again in our personal development studies, in our mindset studies, are our thoughts, our words, and our actions, right? And then really, the things that we have no control over is everything else, right? Other people's thoughts, words, and actions, right? This is, again, root causes of suffering in our lives, is thinking that, we have control over what other people think or say or do, or that we let what other people think, say, or do affect us in a negative way, right? And again, the Stoics were very much interested in tranquility and happiness, and they understood that if you let what other people think about you, say about you, or do to you, right? I mean, that's the other interesting thing is, right, people do things, we tend to take everything so personally, right? And that's a whole topic for a whole other discussion is, you know, it's not about you, right? It's not about you, right? When people are doing their thing, that's their trip, right? And it's their deal. And you have to be able to not let those things affect you. The Stoics also believed that we needed to be vigilant guardians at the gates of our own minds, right? Because it's the things that, the thoughts that we let into our own minds that we think that affect our worldview. They affect how we think about things. They affect how we feel about things. And so the other concept is that the events and circumstances that are not directly related to our own thoughts and words and actions are things that we have no control over, right? And this is actually the root of the Serenity Prayer, for those of you that are familiar with you know, the 12-step programs and AA and things like that. This concept of you know, grant me the serenity to accept. Somebody's going to have to remind me about what that is. Come on, Mandy, hit me.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can change, the courage to, no, I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
So there you go. So you've got, you know, Stoic virtues right in there. You've got this concept of accepting of the fates and accepting the things that you can't change, taking action to change the things that you can and the things that you actually have control over, right? It's so funny. I grew up in a what I call the anonymous family. Both of my parents were in 12-step programs. And so there were little bumper stickers and little refrigerator magnets, you know, all throughout my house growing up. So of course I should know that stuff off the top of my head. So this is an interesting concept here. This is almost like the Simon Sinek find your why kind of thing, right? That you guys are familiar with. But this is the Stoic circle of concern, right? And the things that you have control over. And then as you get farther and farther outside of self, then you have less and less control over these things. And of course, the more you worry about things that you have no control over, then you know, then the more suffering and less control you feel you have in your life. So ultimately, what you have true control over is yourself and what you think and what you say and what you do. And then you may have some immediate influence on family and friends, and then you know, fellow citizens and things like that. And then, you know, countrymen, humanity. You know, you could say, you know, you can kind of go out from there, right? But the concept is the more internal we are, then the more control we have over events and circumstances in our lives. Here's a cool quote from Epictetus. The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals, not under my control, and which have to do with the choices that I actually do control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself, to the choices that are my own, right? So essentially, this is when we talk about self-determination, we talk about having control over our own destiny and things like that, then that really comes from an understanding of this dichotomy of what we have control over and what we don't. Now, of course, in our studies and our understandings, we, when we talk about things like thoughts or things and the law of vibration and things like that, you know, we understand that we have more influence on outside circumstances and events than maybe the Stoics gave credit to. And so, you know, to me, when I think about these things, this is not my ultimate worldview or belief system, but I've incorporated many of these concepts into my belief system where, you know, on a base level, absolutely, you know, my happiness and my level of tranquility definitely comes from my own ability to understand that, it comes from my own thoughts and my own feelings and my own words and actions, which is what I have control over. And then, of course, the more you try to have control over externals, then, the less happy you tend to be, let's say. And then I want to talk about some Stoic concepts, and we'll kind of roll through some of these. And I wrote either the Greek or the Latin word on top, and then a little quote as we go through these. So the concept of sympathia, as you might imagine what it sounds like, is sympathy. And so essentially this is compassion for other people and understanding of the interconnectedness of all life, right? And so, 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius writes in his book of Meditations, remember, this is the emperor of Rome writing this, 2,000 years ago. Meditate often on the interconnectedness and mutual interdependence of all things in the universe. Talk about wisdom, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible to me. So yeah, sympathia is really about this concept of treating other people. And I think, this is one of the foundations of justice, right? Is compassion and understanding that we're all connected, that we are all the same. Then there's this concept of catalepsis, and this kind of stems from this dichotomy of control concept. And catalepsis translates to impressions, right? Which really just means, and there are many, many Stoic quotes, and my own version of this is shit happens to everybody. It's about how you deal with it, right? And of course, Epictetus is a little more eloquent than the way I just described that. So we are disturbed not by the things that happen, but by our opinions of the things that happen, right? So it's about having an understanding of how the events in our lives, the circumstances in our lives, the things that are outside of our own control, how we react to these things, how we interpret these things, right? And this is really one of the most powerful, let's say, liberating concepts of Stoicism, is this understanding that it's not what happens, it's how you interpret it, right? It's based on your understanding or how you react to certain things. And here's an interesting one, Premeditatio malorum. And so as it looks like premeditation, right? So thinking about malorum, and as you guys may know, mal is bad, right? And so this is almost a negative visualization, if you would. And these kinds of concepts are a little controversial in our circles, but this, to me, essentially, this is about thinking about the bad stuff that could happen while still expecting the good things to happen. So, that concept of expect the best, plan for the worst, or whatever it might be. For me, as a wilderness guide, as somebody who spent almost 30 years leading groups in the backcountry, if I only identified, all the rainbows and unicorns that I would experience, in my travels, then when challenging situations approach, well, then you're not prepared for them. So I give these guys a lot of credit for this concept of premeditatio malorum, which is essentially, anticipating troubles before they happen, right? And so Seneca has a cool quote: "The person who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive," right? And so for me, when I'm out with groups, I have to, especially this time of year is our monsoon season here. We get torrential biblical rains and hailstorms and lightning and things like that. And if I don't plan for those things when I'm out with groups in the wilderness, well, then things can be a lot worse, right? So it's really just about, the old Boy Scout motto of be prepared for things, right? So I'm interested to hear your take on this. I think, the idea of meditating on these things and putting too much energy into the negative, I think I would take issue with. But the concept of identifying, what's the worst that can happen, right? I mean, that to me is the concept of, identifying, what are the options here? What are the possible outcomes, right? Because with any given circumstance, there's an infinite number of outcomes. Some are more probable than others, and I think it's important to at least identify and understand what those probable potential outcomes are. And then, of course, we understand that if we focus our energy on the outcomes that we do want, then we. So I'm taking Stoicism to another level, let's say. But if we identify the outcomes that we do want, and we put our energy into those things, then we understand through quantum mechanics and by the nature of vibration and thought that we actually do have an influence on the outcome of events. Then here's another interesting one is memento mori, memento vivere. And so in Latin, mori is death, right? In Spanish, it's muerte, right? And vivere, of course, is life, right? And so this is an interesting thing. Remember that you will die to remember that you will live. It's really kind of an intense concept, right? And Marcus Aurelius, who was seen as a god in Rome 2,000 years ago, hired somebody to follow him around the streets of Rome while people were throwing roses and cheering his name and calling him a god. And he had a person following him around all the time, whispering in his ear on his chariot, "You are just a man. You are just a man." Right? Very interesting. But this concept of meditating, or at least understanding our own mortality, right? And this comes from this kind of brings us to the concept of life is short, right? And live your life, and live your life in the moment, because you never know what's going to happen, right? Anything can happen at any given time, right? So to me, this is a very, very powerful Stoic concept. And of course, the quote from Marcus, "Perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense," right? And this concept, I would argue, and you guys would probably agree, has found its way into many modern philosophies, right? This live each day like it's your last, right? This is not the first time you've heard such things, right? And there's power in that. I remember one of the first sessions I did here on the John Lavenia Success Mastermind was about being an impeccable warrior based on the teachings of Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan. And one of Don Juan's teachings as well also is, in order to be an impeccable warrior, you need to live every moment as if it's your last and you're going into battle, and that there is no there's no room for not being true to yourself, right? And not living your best life and not being your best self. And there's no excuse for that, right? And we're all guilty of it. We all get caught up in drama and trauma and all kinds of stuff in our lives. But this is a very, very powerful lesson, to live each day like it's your last, right? And then here's superatis adversus, which is overcoming adversity, right? And another cool quote by Seneca: "To bear trials with a calm mind robs misfortune of its strength and burden." Very similar to the Epictetus quote earlier about dichotomy of control. But these guys were all about having a calmness and a presence of mind in the face of adversity, in order to not be so affected by the ups and downs and the storms of life, right? So this is a cool quote by Seneca. And then amor fati is another one that really rings true to me. And of course, amore, you guys know, is love in Italian, right? And in Latin. And fati is fate. And so this concept of love your fate, love your life, be grateful for the blessings and all the experiences in your life, whether you see them as good or bad or positive or negative, they have all helped to shape who you are as a person. They've all, even if you don't realize it, every experience in your life has been a gift for us, right? In order to learn and grow and understand. And so this concept of amor fati actually was coined by Nietzsche, but is considered a Stoic concept. And so the quote by Marcus here is, accept the things to which fate binds you and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart. But this concept of loving your life, loving your fate, being grateful for the events in your life, even, it's easy to be grateful for what we see as, good things in our lives, right? Or what we put value judgments on in terms of good things in our lives. But the real challenge is to look at the things that we might consider to be challenges or negative experiences in our lives. And the reality is, and you guys might agree, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but to me, the most growth that we do as human beings, the exponential launch pad to personal growth, more often than not, comes from trauma, adversity, negative, challenging experiences, right? And to me, this is another powerful Stoic concept. And so again, I think, we all have employed many, if not all, of these concepts, maybe without the Latin terminology, right? But I'll put money on it that you guys have all used these concepts and these practices in your life. Zeno, the first Stoic philosopher, when he was a lad, before he founded the school of Stoicism, went to go see the oracle at Delphi. And the oracle told Zeno that in order to live a good life, he must converse with the dead. And he didn't quite understand what that meant. And it took him a lifetime to understand. And it really wasn't about talking to the spirits. It was about reading the thoughts and the words of other wise people and seeking wise counsel, right? And so, we do this on a regular basis with our book study and our Success Mastermind here, is we seek wise counsel from people that have lived before us and have written down their thoughts and their feelings and their words, right? And of course, the challenge is to not necessarily adopt everything as your own, but to put it through your own filter. That's kind of the concept of logic and grammar and rhetoric, right? Is you've got information that comes in, you've got the processing like a computer, as it bounces around in your intellect, and then as you speak those things and share those ideas with others, right? Then you have a responsibility of the words that you say, that you have put them through the test of understanding and discerning whether or not those things are true to you, at least. So anyway, the way that we can speak with the dead or converse with the dead is by reading, right? And we all know that readers are leaders and all kinds of stuff that we've talked about here in the Success Mastermind. This is another powerful one. And to me, this is about, and I didn't put the Greek, but the concept is the view from above. And to me, it's about perspective. And, when life is getting you down and you feel like you're bogged down in all of the trials and tribulations of a physical experience on planet Earth, the Stoics would do this, and I would argue that many of us do this. I've often called it the 30,000 foot view or the 100,000 foot view, but this concept of stepping out of yourself a little bit or a lot, and gaining perspective. And of course, the farther you step out of yourself, the more perspective you get, and the more you realize maybe how trivial the things that you were worried about truly are, right? And you get a big picture view of things versus, just being so tunnel vision on, the events and circumstances in your own life. So the view from above, I think, is another one of those powerful concepts. And yeah, they would literally do meditations where, they would leave their body, fly out above Athens, and, in a meditative state, and gain perspective and insight and answers on their lives. And I gather that we all have done a version of this. And then I'm going to finish up with another Marcus quote. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And this could have been written by Napoleon Hill, Neville Goddard, Wayne Dyer, any of these personal development mindset authors, Joseph Murphy, Power of Your Subconscious Mind, right? All these books that we've read. And yet here's a guy 2,000 years ago that essentially is saying thoughts are things, and they affect our lives, and especially the quality of our lives. And if I were to sum up Stoicism in a sentence, this probably sums up Stoicism in one sentence, right? Is that happiness depends on the quality of our thoughts and what we think about. So there we go. I'm going to stop my share here. Boom. Cool, you guys. All right, look, I see John is with us. We got everybody. Edward's here too. Cool, you guys. Well, I want to open up the floor because I want to hear what you guys have to think about, have to say about some of these concepts and virtues and things like that. So hit me. I want to hear what you got to say. Virginia, what's on your mind?
Hey, this was wonderful as always. I never really understood Stoicism, and I think this is a very clear and easy explanation. So I want to thank you for that. I still want you to hire a VA and just take all of your presentations and type them up as is, word for word, because imperfect and done is better than perfect and never done. All right, guys, so we'll talk about that more later. I have a couple of questions. So, because my notes are written in Word, because if I were to try to write them by hand, I wouldn't be able to read them. So I typed them up. So why did you digress from the terminology? Your two things, the 4 cardinal virtues, and you used some of the exact words, but then you substituted courage and what was the other one? Fortitude?
So
fortitude is courage, and prudence you substituted for temperance. And I was just wondering why you did that.
Because in many sort of more modern Stoic schools, they have essentially translated those Latin terms, right? So prudence could be equated to wisdom, and has been, and so that's.
But you also have wisdom. I had to minimize, go on the internet, look up thesaurus,
so
and synonyms. I'm like,
so
okay, what's the
Latin,
synonym for temperance and all this? Yeah.
In Latin, it's prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And the two that I substituted, because I feel like they have more power in our modern vocabulary, and they're essentially interchangeable. So prudence and wisdom are considered to be the same, and fortitude and courage.
But you did temperance.
No, temperance is different.
I looked up temperance and I found prudence, but when I looked up prudence, I found wisdom.
Interesting. Well,
yeah. I was just wondering why you substituted.
This is my interpretation, and I appreciate that, and you guys are welcome to interpret it any way you like. But from the things that I've seen, prudence is wisdom and fortitude is courage. Temperance is its own thing, maybe somewhere where you looked it up, I don't know. But yeah, with that. And then is that what you're getting at in terms of the?
Well, just was wondering why you substituted terminology. You kept wisdom and you
Because
kept,
if you were to look up, if you were to Google right now the 4 Stoic Cardinal Virtues, you would get 2 different lists like that. You would get the Latin translation, you would get the Latin translation, and you would get kind of the more modern.
Yeah, I kept getting the Latin one when I Googled it. I'm like, well, why did he change the words? Okay, so that's one thing. And what is the, well, you are. And what is the 4 isms? I started to write those down, but I didn't get them all down.
The Hellenistic philosophies. So there's cynicism, there's Epicureanism.
Cynicism, okay.
Right, so the cynics, and that comes from kynikos, which is dog-like. So the cynics were not concerned about things like art and culture and social norms and things like that, and they rejected things like wealth and material properties and possessions. That's kind of cynicism. Then you've got Epicureanism, which is the avoidance of pain and the seeking of pleasure, which has been sort of misinterpreted to be more of a hedonistic kind of approach at life, but it was really more about a moderate approach to pleasure, to, that happiness was based on having a certain amount of pleasure in your life. That was kind of Epicureanism. And then you've got skepticism, which is questioning everything, doubting everything. They had this whole system of Socrates had skeptic tendencies. And one of his famous quotes is, the only thing that I know for sure is that I know nothing. And so the skeptics believed that ultimate truth was unknowable, whereas the Stoics had more of a process of logic and grammar and rhetoric, which they called the trivium, in order to discern things that are true.
Gotcha. It seems like the skepticism goes very well with the cynicism.
I almost did a whole kind of thing in the beginning, and I just realized that I was going to go too far into these other things, and so I just kind of stuck with that. And then the other one is Neoplatonism, but yeah, that's what are considered the Hellenistic philosophies. Thank you, Virginia, as always. Thank you for your input. Here he is, the man, the myth, the legend.
Hey.
Yeah, what's up, buddy?
Hey, man, all I can say is we wish you were on book study group last night and last week, because like he's quoted Epictetus like a number of times over here. Like Epictetus is, and Marcus too, both of them. So who would have thunk it, right? So Dale Carnegie. Okay, cool. So here's my the number one word that's coming up for me with all this is perspective. So all this stuff that we do with personal development and philosophy and all that is to what end? So that I can see better, right? So that I can behave better, in this crazy friggin' world that we're in. And so, in fact, did you know I used to live on Seneca Way in Arizona? Yeah, I was on Seneca.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Seneca, baby.
Yeah, that's right. So, anyway, I don't know, maybe that's a sign, but I really like the idea of the view from above. In fact, I kind of came up in our conversation here in general session like a week ago. I think Lynn recalls where I was talking about, sometimes just in the silence of that, just having a bigger perspective, almost like, I'm not even on the planet. I'm seeing, here's this thing. In fact, what Wayne Dyer talked about when he was around was if you were like an alien looking at, this Earth thing, that you might conclude that it just peoples, like that's an action, like peopling is a verb, not a noun, right? So here's all these, all this peopling that's going on, and so to consider that as an action, and that's what I'm doing overall. That's some interesting perspective, and it makes for a bit of non-attachment, right? If I can survey a bigger scene, and if I can see, with bigger perspective, then I'm not, this tiny little thing anymore, right? That is the effect of everything else. It's like, I just get to observe it. It's not something that I can claim that I consistently, succeed at all the time, So anyway, thank you for this. This was, man, you are like, you got exhibits and stuff. You're all organized and whatever. I just get on here and talk about stuff. So wow,
I give you so much props for doing that, but I feel like I got one shot every couple of weeks. I want to make it count. So yeah, dude,
you're awesome, man. Thank you.
Exhibits. You're awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perspective, use it or lose it, right? And that's kind of been one of my sayings over the years. But yeah, that view from above, the 30,000 foot view, the 100,000 foot view, because the farther we, the more insulated we are about things. It's this interesting dichotomy, right? Because on the one hand, that's where we understand the things that we ultimately have control over, right? So there's a certain importance to having that internalized view of things. But then when we get so personal about life, and this person did that to me, and how could they do that to me? And oh my God, the traffic and the whatever, fill in the blanks about, the things that we tend to get frustrated and upset about. That's when I think that it's powerful to step outside of ourselves and realize what's, how important is that really, right? So thank you, John. Lynn, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. This has been a very interesting talk. It's kind of like bits of it I found I really got, on an intellectual level, and bits of it sort of really just got me in the gut. Some of it I've lived that, and others it's like, yeah, I've processed that. When you were talking about wisdom, I was thinking, well, we've got the internet. And I was thinking, yeah, and that's not wisdom, that's information. And if you take the information and reflect on it, that becomes knowledge. And then if you take the knowledge and experience that in the world, that forms your diamond of wisdom. But it comes from a whole range of perspectives. It doesn't come from any one place, and you can't have a bottle of wisdom. You can't wisdom off the internet. That was one of the things that really got me. And the living each day like it's your last. That particularly happens when life is kind of raw and a bit angst-ridden, and you really do. And there becomes so much value in your life. And it also gives you that incredible overview and perspective that you were talking about, John. I think they can kind of go, at least they can complement one another really well. If you're on that plane, sort of you can do more, you can hopefully think better. Anyway, that's me.
That's great, thank you. Well said on knowledge and wisdom, right? But we live in what's called the information age, right? It's not called the wisdom age, right? And this understanding that, yeah, there's so much information out there. I like this is a very Stoic concept as well, going back to this concept of the trivium of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, and what we put in, how we process that information, and how we put it out, right? So input, processing, and output. But yeah, this concept of, yeah, there's so much information out there that we can take in, but that just because you read a book, or just because you download or look at a website or whatever it is, doesn't mean that you have understanding, right? You're just absorbing information. You may not even be getting true knowledge out of that. But then this concept of applied knowledge through experience is really that knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. And so, yeah, you can't download wisdom off of the internet, right? You have to have some life experience and some perspective, and some knowledge to be able to be wise. So very cool. Who else? I want to hear from you guys. What's up, Gail? What's up, Edward? What's up, Catherine? Hit me with something. What do you think about all this? Gail, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. A little tired, but I'm good. I should have been writing a lot more, but I didn't. But the one of the last things was the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, and I think that is so true. And I have a daughter, not the one I live with, another one. She's always thinking, woe is me. If something bad is going to happen, it's going to happen to me. Oh, yes, we did this. And of course, because it's me, this is what happened. And she's been like that all her life. And I keep trying to tell her not to think that way, but you can't teach somebody that. Well, I can't teach her. Doesn't seem to work. And I wish that she was able to learn that. Because if she stops and looks back at everything that she's done or has, she would see it's not always bad that's happened to her, good has as well. And the other thing was under amor fati, well, I need my glasses. Everything we experience makes us who we are today. And I think that is so true. Everything we experience, the good and the bad, make you who you are today. And when I look back on my life, there's not one thing that I would like to change, because if I did, I wouldn't be who I am. I like who I am. And everything that I've experienced has helped me to become me. So I think, that's very true. So that's all I have to say. But thank you very much for today. Again, a lot to think about.
Well, thank you. That was really powerful what you just said, and and I try to. That's really the way that I try and see the events in my life. Right, that everything that happens to you, whatever value judgment we place on it, those things make you who you are. Right, and I think we've all. And that goes back to stuff happens to everybody. It's what you deal with. It's how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Right? And if you just want to be in the pity party and poor me and why me and I'm just effect and all that kind of stuff, then then that's not such a pleasant place to be in your life.
Yeah.
You mentioned was it your niece that you were talking about?
My middle daughter, my second daughter.
I have my oldest child is like that, and I call it the Eeyore mentality.
The what?
Eeyore,
like
from Winnie the Pooh, right?
Yeah.
Was that A.A. Milne? But there's this whole study of the 4 different personality types as they relate to the characters of Winnie the Pooh. And so you're either a Tigger, a Piglet, a Pooh, or an Eeyore kind of thing. And I can't remember, once the Pooh is phlegmatic. I don't know if you guys look that up or whatever, you'll find that. Maybe I'll do a chat on that one day. But the Eeyore mindset is this, poor me, bad things always happen to me.
Yeah.
And that, and that goes back to like the Henry Ford quote and all these other things we understand about mindset. If you think bad stuff is going to happen to you, you're right. Or this understanding of, if you don't see those things, and this ties right into amor fati, right? If you don't see those things as a gift or a blessing, then you feel like you're victimized, right? If you see those things as an opportunity for growth, and as the potential to better yourself or learn about yourself, then it's okay to have those experiences, because they're presented to us for a reason. Very cool. Thank you, Gail. Mandy, I'm calling on you. I know you were taking notes anyway, so what do you got? What do you think about this stuff?
Hello. Quite a few notes, yeah. I'm just trying to put it into some order, but following on from what everybody else said, that's some of the ones I highlighted. So the fact that what did you call it? Amore frutti. What 40? No, I can't read my writing. I should word. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So this has come. I've always seen that there's always been good in the obstacles that have come into my life. It just might not always be at the time that you see it. Sometimes you obviously you see it later, but if you can look back at it, and Gail's daughter, there'll always be something in there that was good that came out of it. There's a book out there by Barbara DeAngelis called The Secrets of Life Every Woman Should Know. And there's a bit in there about obstacles. And she says all obstacles are lessons in disguise. Honor them and learn from them. It might be a good book for your daughters to read because there's lots of other little bits in there as well. And she talks again a lot of big things about our thoughts. And that does come up a lot, doesn't it? So it's all sort of from what it's all grown from there. I mean, I didn't know what Stoicism was either, so it's really good to learn some of these bits and pieces. So I'm trying to explain to somebody as well at the moment about limiting beliefs and thoughts and how your thoughts lead to your feelings, to your actions, and that. And because we've done so much of it, it's really hard to know where to start. So this can lead into it, but I really do believe that the happiness of life 100% depends on your thoughts. And you were talking about the pity party. It made me laugh because I've also been reading Napoleon Hill's Keys to Positive Thinking. He's talking about a positive mental attitude. And he's got eliminate all negative thoughts by self-inspection. And one of his things is there's always 4 reasons for it. So he says, you're either feeling sorry for yourself, passing judgment, blaming somebody else, you've got hurt ego, or you're being selfish. And so he's got pity party, patsy party, pride party, and pig party. And you don't want to take part in any of those parties because those are the things that are affecting your thoughts. Oh, bear with me 2 seconds. James, are you going? No. Oh, okay, good. Right, his dad's coming to pick him up. And so, yeah, there's nothing stronger than the thing about your thoughts. I think it is so important that you keep those onto the right place. And also the other thing you did have in here, this thing I mentioned it before, like you said, all events are neutral, and we give them power, and we give them the power, the positive and negative, by how we interpret them. But how we interpret them comes from our past and all the experiences that we've had as well. So if we've had a good experience around something, we'll probably interpret it good. If we haven't had a good experience around it, we're going to interpret it badly. Are you still there, Stuart? With you?
Yeah, I'm here.
You wrote it up.
Why did I?
No, it was just like you were staring into space and thinking, are you still there? And this thing about looking for troubles in the future, we used to do that a lot in the council. You have to do risk assessments, but not everybody does risk assessments quite to the level that you're supposed to. I think they don't want to think about what might happen. But risk assessments are supposed to be for that reason, aren't they? So that you can think about what's going to happen, but then you forget about it. You know that you've put together what you're going to do should that thing happen, and then you go off and enjoy yourself, and that's it. It's sort of everything around it is taking all these things so you can have a better life. But the letting go of control, that one for me has been really important recently because things have come back up in my life that I've sort of pushed away for a very long time, and some of that has then led to a feeling of not being able to control things. And it's made me realize that, and I have in the past been able to do that, to let go of control, but it's so important that you do, because otherwise you just go around in circles and you're just not you don't have a positive mindset when you do that. And this relates to things that come from my childhood, and it relates to relationships and things that I haven't been in for a long time. And the way that, and that's why I picked some of these books up, but some of it is the way to get rid of that is to pass it to your higher power. Well, I found that one really, really good. So if you try and you can feel that you're desperately trying to control a situation, a person, or an outcome, and you can just pass it to the higher power and say, take over from me. I believe that whatever you're doing is for my highest good, and there'll be good coming from it. So you can see it as an obstacle if you want, but there's good coming from it. And you get a really good sense of serenity coming over you when you can do that. And the higher power can be whatever it is to you. It can be God, it can be the universe in my case. But you're getting, because you're not responsible for anybody else, and you're not responsible for keeping anybody else safe. So when our kids start going out into the world, we can't be here all day trying to keep them safe. We just have to trust that whatever happens is in our and their highest good. So that's a roundabout way of covering all that, I'm afraid, but because you're so much better and articulate at saying all of this.
That's because I spent so much time organizing all that. You just hit on another one of these Stoic concepts, somnum buono, highest good, right? Same kind of thing, you know. But when you were talking about the parties that you don't want to join, to me, that they all kind of equate to one form of self-indulgence or another, and or self-importance, right? And this, again, these concepts of Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda just were etched in me as a young lad. Those books changed my life as a young man. So when I hear about things like that, I immediately go to self-indulgence and self-importance, because they all stem, right? All the why me, the pity party, the other party, right? It's all because, you know, how could something like that happen to me? Or, you know, I'm so important, and, you know, how dare that person do this to me or say that to me, or how dare the universe bestow me with this negative experience or whatever it might be. And I really appreciated you kind of bringing it back into the business realm when you were talking about risk management and things like that, and risk aversion, because again, for me, I think that concept of premeditatio malorum, thinking on, you know, what's the worst that can happen kind of thing, right? That to me is the essence of risk management and risk aversion. And again, as an outfitter and a wilderness guide, that stuff, you know, is going through my head, you know, at any given moment. You know, where's the mountain lion going to jump off of the boulder? You know, where's the flood going to come from, or where, you know, where's the bear going to come out of, or whatever it might be, or which person do I need to be concerned about having altitude sickness, or having balance issues, or whatever it might be. Anyway, thank you guys so much for your input and your participation. This was a fun session. I'm glad, you know, again, John and I have been talking about, you know, it seems like every book study that we've done has had Stoic influences and things like that. And it doesn't surprise me that that the latest Dale Carnegie book that you're reading now has Epictetus quotes and things like that. So very cool. So yeah, and I'm grateful. I'm glad that some of you guys have said, well, I didn't really understand what Stoicism was. And obviously this, you know, people spend their whole lives, you know, studying and applying these techniques and practices and understandings. But hopefully this was a cool 101. And in my studies of personal development over the last couple of years, with John and with you guys, I'm constantly reminded of Stoic principles and Stoic concepts, just like I've been constantly reminded of the universal laws and Hermetic principles that I talked about the other day, right? And so these are topics and subjects that I've been wanting to kind of share with you guys for a while and tie into some of these things that we've been studying and learning about, because again, you know, these are thousands of years old concepts, and yet, you know, we're seeing these things presented in more modern literature, and it's always fun for me to sort of trace some of these things back. And then, you know, when somebody drops a quote by Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius, now it'll be more than just a cool quote. You'll be able to kind of, you know, put it in perspective and have a different kind of understanding of some of those things. So thanks again, you guys. What a great session. Today's Tuesday. I don't think we have anything going on this evening, but tomorrow, general session with our dear friend, Glenn Henderson. And thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you guys tomorrow on the John Lavenia Success Mastermind.